Good evening, folks. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to connect to your Zoom and make sure that your sound is working. Give you a moment to get acclimated and for me to fix my collar. I just fill the air to make sure that you all know that your sound is working. And we'll get started in just a moment. I have a lot of questions, so I'm excited to lead this Q&A. But more importantly, we want to hear your questions. So we'll tell you how to do that in just a moment when we get started. Maybe I'll start by sharing a little bit as we make sure that everybody can get in. I'll start by sharing just some of our upcoming films. Upcoming at the JCC, we are coming back in person. We wanted to do this film. Petit Rat was originally scheduled for in person, but with Omicron, the JCC really made it clear that we should not be having public events in January. But come February, we are going to be back, and we're feeling good about this. We're going to do this in the safest ways possible. It means vaccination required, and we're going to be doing at first 50% capacity in the theater until we really feel comfortable enough. And February 6th, we're starting a run of the film Breaking Bread. That film was at our Other Israel Film Festival, I'm going to say 2 years or maybe even 3 years ago at this point. And we helped support that film, and we're really glad that it's making it to theaters in early February. It's going to have a wide release and tells a wonderful story of Jewish and Arab collaborations over food at the Haifa Food Festival. Then following that, we're screening that film twice, so it's also going to be screening on February 8th, which is in exactly 2 weeks from now. Then on February 15th, we are screening in person the Israeli TV series The New Black, which is called in Hebrew Shababnikim. If you've seen Shtisel, and you might have seen Srugim, this kind of falls in between of that religious kind of arc and spectrum. This is the niche that is not quite modern Orthodox and not quite ultra Orthodox, but somewhere in between, more of the black hat. That's why it's called The New Black, and follows that community in Israel and that experience. So please join us for that. It'll also be available virtually starting Friday, February 11th for that week, and it's the first 2 episodes of that series. Also coming up this month, we have Albert Einstein, Still a Revolutionary. We're going to screen that the week of Friday, February 18th till February 24th virtually. We're mixing virtual and in-person programs at this point till we feel that we could really go back fully in person, because that's really, as a community center, that's the experience we want. We also feel does best justice to these films and to these conversations. I'll also note that we have a winter film course. I'll be leading that once again, new Israeli film, exploring new films and having discussions every week on the impact of the Israeli film industry that is truly thriving. But now to tonight's film. I'm very excited to welcome the filmmakers and subjects of Petit Rat, I was going to say cat, we'll talk about the title in a moment, but I do want to note, of course, January 27th, that's this Thursday, is International Holocaust Memorial Day, and we actually are showing this film. We had these dates in mind. I think we might have mentioned that at the beginning, Vera, of our conversation, but if not, it was definitely part of our intention to really include that this week as our way to honor the day. And I'll start by saying that what I love about this film and what we really, I think, in some ways want to honor is talking about how this film is relevant today, and not just to put the Holocaust into its own vacuum, but rather see how it impacts beyond just the story of the Holocaust. And I think this film does that very, very well. So really glad to have here two women that hopefully you know quite well. I felt like I knew them after seeing the film. Vera Wagman and Deborah Wagman. Thank you so much for being here with us and for joining this conversation. Folks, I'm going to ask a few questions, but then I hand it over to you for your questions. If you have questions, place them in the chat. We will call on you and let you open up your microphone so you could ask these questions live and be a part of this conversation. So let me start. Obviously, your mother's story is a story you've known your whole life, I'm assuming. But what made you want to make this film, and what made you want to make it now? Vera,
well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Isaac and everyone at the JCC for inviting us, my sister Deborah and I, to be a part of this very special screening of Petit Rat. We are going to be celebrating 9 years of the creation of Petit Rat this February. That's how long it's taken to get to this point. And the way that it started, the reason that it started is because I had this moment of seeing my mother, my sister, and me dance together for the very first time, something that we had never done before. And it was simply this vision of Deborah and I carrying my mother across the stage in this role reversal, this end of life role reversal. Our mother, thankfully, is still alive. So having said that, it was thinking about so much that had happened between all of us growing up and creating a dance that was around the three of us. And then it grew into this documentary, which is not how it started. It simply started as we're gonna do some choreography on the three of us. And that's what we did. And then 2 months later, we were in the Baryshnikov Art Center. We were sitting around talking about asking these questions and filming this dance, because by that point I knew in my mind I could see what this could possibly be. I could see what kind of a film this could possibly be. And subsequently, over time, we filmed more interviews. And by 2017, we were creating a rough cut. And by 2020, which was at the very beginning of the pandemic, we were creating the final film. So it's been quite the experience, quite the 9 years of my life to bring this to fruition, and it's been worth every moment.
That's wonderful. I'm going to give you an odd compliment too. I love the length of this film. It's not too long. It's not dragged out. It's not too short. So it's rare to see in documentaries, and it's a unique length, obviously, and will I think hopefully make it more accessible.
Thank you. But I just want to say, we had an original rough cut at 75 minutes, which was a very different film than this. And then when I started working with my editor, she came into this project completely blind to the whole thing. And she is French and she's Native American. And she brought her cultural understanding of France to this subject matter. And we created a film that we knew needed to be shorter. And I think as a result, it was far more impactful.
It's very brave, I have to say. I'll also note that one of the executive producers is a good friend of ours. I think we've shown all of her films, Roberta Grossman, a fabulous filmmaker in her own right.
Fabulous.
Deborah, how involved were you in the whole process of the filmmaking? Obviously, the dance, you were very involved.
Vera brought it to my attention, and I thought initially I had pretty much worked through a lot of my conflicts and traumas, with my past. And then Vera brought it up, and I just, I wasn't very positive about it. I wasn't like, sure, let's go, let's do this, Robert. I was a little more negative in the beginning, but I allowed myself to be open to the possibilities of what it could be for all of us. And it ended up being a really extraordinary experience over the years. I just became more comfortable in front of the camera and speaking about my experience, my life, and my intertwining with Vera and my mother. And it just happened. We just got better and better. It wasn't easy all the time, but yeah, it was worth it.
So there's a lot of elements in this film that I'd like to explore, and elements that make this film, I think very, very connecting for people. First of all, there's the mother-daughter relationship, which I think is beautifully told in the film, and I had never seen before. I'm sure this is not the. I'm guessing it's not the first time that that's a dance has been created between daughters and their mother, but it is such a beautiful bonding concept. Just for the family, like, every family should have that experiment. I don't know how well it would go in my family. We all have left feet, as they say, but still, as the bonding experience, this can be a program. I would love to see this at our JCC.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that process for you.
The process of creation, of bringing the three of us together, mother, daughters. Yeah. I think the concept of just getting us in a room was enough to really excite my mom, who also looked at this as a way to connect with her daughters. And I know that I felt that way towards her, and I felt that way towards Deborah, that this was a way for us to look at our lives together and what could happen, what could be said, what could we create with this. All of this was just such a great unknown at the beginning, but I think that it's so funny you posed that question, because I think that's a great idea. There's something about this process, about opening up this Pandora's box, that, are you taking a risk? Absolutely. But if you are willing to go down the road and listen and experience some really difficult conversations and memories, that there is something extremely healing about this that I also wasn't prepared for. That the connection between my mother and myself, and Deborah and myself, we became much closer as a result. So yes, I would highly recommend having this experience as a family.
Deborah?
I found it, the process, very healing. And when we started dancing, Vera had certain things in mind, but Vera, always being who she is, would be like, Deb, what do you think here? And then she opened it up for both of us to be able to choreograph the dance together. And so it just, again, it was very, happened very organically. And my mother's joy, just being there, all our joy. And it was just fun, and it was hard. There were a lot of repetition. We were really sore afterwards, but it was so beautiful at the end, especially for the final pose there, when we're on the floor and holding our mother's legs. And I burst into tears. It just was so meaningful. And it was very healing. The whole process with our mother talking, bringing up subjects that really I thought had kind of been put in the past and done, and it was very healing.
So you have this beautiful experience, and then you have it on camera, and you want to share that with the world. Why is it important for other people to see this? Why was it important for you that other people saw this and heard this story?
Well, I'm going to just say that part of the importance of sharing it was the importance of allowing myself on a personal level to express these very impactful, these very deep, these very painful things. It's not that I've gone around throughout my life just wanting to make a film about whatever happened in my life. It wasn't about that. It was about, it started this way, but to ultimately finish it well, I had to be very truthful. I knew my truth. I knew what the truth was. The question was, could I say it out loud? Because of the possible things that could be said to me as a result, such as, your mother survived. Your mother did not go through a camp experience. You know, there are people who I know feel that way. And that was a very big fear, that I felt very protective of my mother in that sense. The other thing that I was very concerned about was sharing this idea that because of my mother's trauma, I was so afraid to have children. I was so afraid to not be able to go past that and be the mother that I would be versus the mother that she would be. So I was very concerned about sharing that. But at this point, and I'll never forget it, it was in October of 2017. It was the last shoot. And I know that Deborah and I were ready to talk about all of it in right then and there. And after that, it was just like it all fell out, you know. Ultimately, the idea would be, as after so much editing, after so much time with this material, what is the purpose of doing this? The purpose would be to be able to share something that was so difficult that people would find a common experience with, and that it would be okay for them. That it took me a lot to get through to being okay with it. And I wanted ultimately to have that, to be able to give that experience to people who could relate to this material.
Deborah, do you want to add to that?
I got so involved in Vera's response that I forgot the question.
I'm really curious about the importance of why bring this to an audience and what you want the audience reaction to be.
You know, the story has universal topics, history, dance, Vera's, what she just talked about her traumas, my experience as a dancer who loved and hated dance. And I loved dancing, and I was having a really hard time throughout my whole career. And I was able to finally openly talk about my eating disorder, the eating disorder I was dealing with. And it was just these topics. People struggle. We all struggle with, you know, things throughout our lives, and it's universal. So whether it's an addiction to food, or an eating disorder, or an addiction to a substance, or family trauma, I think we all go on a certain level into those areas. And so this film, I really believe, touches people in so many ways, in different ways. It doesn't have to be the exact same thing, but it does. And I've witnessed it. The people who have watched the film come to me and say, oh my gosh, I get that. I've been through that. And they talk about their experiences. And so it's, you know, in the end, it's all about love, and loving oneself, and loving your family, and loving your friends, and relationships. And it's kind of all brought together into this documentary.
And especially at this disconnected time, this film's about connection. And I think
Absolutely.
it's so crucial for an audience to have this right now.
It's all about
Vera, I'm going to jump off something that you had mentioned, of course, was just how the story, as far as the relationship to the Holocaust, and that's a part of this. Your mother's experience. One of the reasons that I personally wanted to show this in honor of Holocaust Memorial Day is that this is not maybe the most classic experience. This is not maybe, or maybe I don't want to start comparing numbers, but of course people have had more horrific experiences in the Holocaust, but this is part of the Holocaust experience, and your mother is a survivor, and
Yes.
and it's a big part, I think, of who she is, from what I could tell from the film, and that's a story that's important to tell.
Yes.
How much of that? How I want to dive in a little bit to the Holocaust, her Holocaust story. How much did you know that you wanted to make that a part of the film? And it's really the anchor of the film in many ways. Was that always going to be there? And how did you approach this element within the film?
Well, I didn't go into the early creation of this with a solid idea of how I was going to do this, or how the story would ultimately be told. And it was in part because it was this other difficult story that involved Deborah that I wasn't sure. So there was this period from 2013 to 2017 where I had a lot of time to think about it. And there was a lot of work being done on shorter versions of the story itself. And by 2017, this rough cut specifically had a very small, let's say, area where we were going to talk about the story. And I think it was because I wasn't completely ready to really dive in. It was actually Roberta who brought a light to all of it was just seeing Roberta's films that impacted me in such a way that I knew that there was going to be a way to tell my mother's story and give it the space that it deserved. Because Isaac, as you're saying, there were terrible, terrible things that happened, as we know. And our mother was very lucky, and we know how lucky she was. For many, many reasons, she was very lucky. What my mother dealt with was childhood trauma. She was psychologically traumatized by her experiences. We grew up with her story. She spoke about her story a lot. And I think it was that kind of hammering in that ultimately guided me to this place of posing the question, how do I tell this story? How do I tell it in a way that gives her a true platform for what she experienced, which, as you again say, it's a different story from a lot of stories from the Holocaust. So all of these things combined, I think that there was just a period of time that there was just a lot of thought, a lot of writing about it. There were a lot of discussions. My husband, Russell Rothberg, who is my producing partner on this, he's a writer and a producer. We had multiple discussions about this as well. And then our great editor, by the time she came in, she took the material that had been filmed in France, which I knew about, which I believe Deb had found out about later. It was a trip that my parents had taken to the south of France in 1990, where my mother reconnected with the son of the family who hid her, André Chagnon, with Michelle and her sister Janine Thomas, who she stayed with. And when I saw that footage, I knew that that would ultimately be a part of it. when Esther came in, her obvious connection to the language and the culture, she pulled very specific clips and edited them together in a way that when I first saw what she did, I just said, yes, that's it. That's the way to tell this story. And that's how we got here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question, then I want to give our audience an opportunity to be a part of the conversation as well. So folks, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll call on you and open your microphone up. But tell us a little bit about your mother and her reaction to the film. I'm so glad to hear that she's still with us. How old is she now?
She's 89. My dad is 91, going to be 92. And both of them have been incredibly supportive. I mean, Deb, you know, I was petrified, I would say, at our first screening. I was petrified to see what the reaction was. And my mother was just kind of blown away by it, as was our dad. They've been completely supportive of it and understanding of why I did it, why I had to do it.
Yeah. Beautiful. And beyond the dance, has the movie itself changed your relationship?
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Completely. Deb, I'll let you talk about that.
And your question is with our parents or with each other or with our
or with each other? It's
well, with our parents, it's just their total support of Vera and the film and what we were doing. They've always been very supportive in our endeavors, and especially with this. And it's a legacy to my mother, really. And my relationship with Vera has only gotten closer, and it's changed. I find that we can be very honest with each other and talk about difficult things without that same intensity that we used to have when we were younger. And I think the film has helped us to that point.
Communicate differently now.
Differently.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So the recommendation is if you can't dance, make a movie with your parents
doing whatever is fun for you. I have to say my initial relationship with my own mother initially was not great. I had a big chip on my shoulder, and you know, as I got older, and then as the film was produced, you know, and especially after I had children, I was able to knock that little chip off my shoulder, because now I understood more as a mom what it is like when you have kids, and you know, and there were 3 of us and I had 2 boys, and what do? You can't please them all the time. You do the best you can, you know. And so I was able to really understand her much better once I started raising my children.
Yeah, I think that once I was able to reveal this what felt like a dark secret about having children, and she completely understood it, my mom, that a lot fell away. A lot of the difficulty fell away. And right now I just recognize the sweetness of the time that we have together and how precious it all is. Mm-hmm. And we get to have that kind of relationship now.
Yes.
That's great. I'd love to bring on a member of our audience to ask a question. Linda Marcus, you made some comments, and I'll ask you to unmute.
Yes. I have 2 questions. One is, what did the dance or movement add to your expression, verbal expression to each other and to your mother of those deeper feelings? do you feel you would have had the same connection if it had just been verbal, like, let's say, family treatment, family therapy, if you'd opened up? What did the fact that you were moving and dancing in this add?
Linda, that is just such a great question. Such a great question. The dance, creating the dance with Deborah, and by the way, our mom Fernand having input into it, such as, I don't want to be carried, or whatever she said, or don't carry me that way. That was taking this experience to a completely different level. We know as dancers that there is something about the expression of dance, your emotion through your body, that words cannot reveal.
The body doesn't lie.
Yeah, yes. So thank you for asking that question, because that dance is completely about that level of communication that went beyond words.
And then I have a second question. I had the feeling when you were both talking about dancing, being in class, being on stage, etc., that the person in the audience was your mother. Mm-hmm. But then I felt in the film, I had the question, did that audience change to like what Alice Miller talks about, the enlightened witness? Like, in other words, whatever you were creating something with an audience looking in, and that they had a different understanding of what you were doing than the eyes of your mother when you were in class or on stage. You know, that the audience, thinking of the audience and doing it for us, that our eyes had a different warmth to it, more healing in a certain way, oddly.
Yeah. Deb, do you want to answer Linda?
Sure, that's a wonderful question, Linda. And I think when my mother used to watch us in ballet class or in performances, there was this pressure, this judgment, this pressure of her expectations of wanting, for myself, speaking for myself, of having to be at a certain level. And so the pressure was very difficult. But I never felt that, you know, as far as making this, and as a dancer in general, no, I loved performing, and I know Vera does too, and did. And so it was a different experience. But with the audience watching this film, I never even thought about it that way, in that sense, of our mother. Like, you were, you're the audience, like our mother.
Yeah, so but I mean, I had the feeling that in sharing that with us, the honesty that you brought to it, that having us as your audience was healing in some way.
So healing.
Yeah. It was very interesting. Lovely film.
Completely. Thank you. I want to just say that, you know, it is this very existential experience to go through something like this. The way Deborah was saying, not thinking about the audience, when we were filming it, when we were creating it, there was no thought about audience at the time. It was very much in the moment. Okay. This is what we're doing. This is how we're connected to each other, you know? And so I think because now we are in front of an audience and we're having these conversations, it really blows open that fourth wall. Whether you are aware of it or not, that fourth wall is gone once you put it out there.
When we were filming, it was us. We were in our bubble. And even with the cameras in that conversation we're having, there's 3 cameras, one on each of us. And somehow we just managed, all 3 of us, to just stay within our focus of each other. It was so natural. And as we filmed more and more through the years, it became much more comfortable. And I'm sure it was for Vera and Mom as well. I'm going to speak for myself that it was just natural to just talk about, very important to just say what I had to say and say what we had to say to each other without thinking about who was watching.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that personally, that was a big deal.
Thank you. We're going to take a question from our very own Juliet Kleitz.
Hi, I'm wondering, I know it's kind of touched upon in the movie, but kind of what your relationship is now to dance. And I know you've pursued other artistic endeavors, you know, directing, and I guess what are some things you're doing now? And are you still dancing, and or how does it relate to dance?
Thanks, Juliet. Well, I still take class. I have a ballet bar in my house. So during the pandemic, like a lot of dancers, I still take class. I still choreograph. I had the opportunity to choreograph a theater piece that was set in a garage during the pandemic. But this choreography, this love of choreography, has been something that I've had my entire life. And I will, at some point, always be choreographing something. So dance is still a very big part of my life. And for Deborah, I know it's the same.
Mm-hmm. So I, with my work that I do, trying to find classes that coordinate with my time and my schedule is very challenging. So I don't get to take classes as often as I'd like. For the last 10 years on and off, I pursued ballroom dancing. It was something I'd always wanted to do. And then for the last few years, I'd had some surgeries and setbacks, physical setbacks. So I'm good now, and I'm just waiting for my teacher to get on board with me so we can start ballroom dancing again. I really miss it a lot. And dance will always be with me. And it sounds weird, but as I'm a Pilates teacher, and I take what I've learned in my career, and it's almost like performing when I teach. So when I teach these groups, you know, and it's always with me. And I hope to be forever dancing my whole life, because it just doesn't go away.
And I think that also speaks to any dancer you speak with, that it is always truly within you. It becomes a part of your DNA. For Deborah and I, for different reasons, that it was cellular for us. But you speak with any dancer and they'll say the same thing. It's always in your life, you know, in one form or another.
I want to thank both of you so much for being here with us and sharing this beautiful film with us.
Thank you.
Folks, please tell your friends about this beautiful film that they can, I believe, still watch tonight on our streaming channel. Please join us for other upcoming films, in person or virtual. Stay safe, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you, everyone who has viewed our film. We really appreciate it. Really appreciate your support.
Thank you. Thank you, Vera.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.